This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
Hi, and welcome to a festive edition of The Away End. I am Craig Courtney, and I am joined by Martin from the It's Not Orange podcast. So, Martin, thank you very much for joining us in The Away End, as sponsored by AMG Logistics.
Cheers, Craig. You're welcome. And happy Christmas and happy New Year to all the Birmingham fans. Hope you're having a good one.
Indeed, and same to your good selves, apart from, obviously, as we'll come on to, the game. But we come off the back of the Boxing Day games. Birmingham with a 2-0 home win against Burton. Hertford game, got to say, Burton put up a bit of a wall that we had to break down, eventually got through that, so pulled off the result there. And yourselves, I think, are very close, 2-1 defeat at Wrexham. So some close games. Boxing Day didn't really turn up as it has done in the past. The silly results. So maybe they will come at the weekend instead. So Birmingham and Blackpool. Wow, what a history. We've had the dull and boring 0-0s. We've had, obviously, one that we'll never forget with the 7-0 defeat as well. But I didn't realise how far back we go as far as games are concerned. In fact, our first game against each other was played in January 1897. We were still known at the time as Small Heath, so it wasn't even Birmingham City at that point in time. We did, though, go on to win 3-1, but then have had a very checkered and close set of results over the years. Between us, over 70 games. In fact, it's actually near enough 100 games that have been played across the clubs between the Cup and the League. We are seeing Birmingham winning 36 of those. However, we have also lost 42. So it's a very close one, but being edged by Blackpool at the moment. Last game we played, 2-1 in the FA Cup. Obviously a different game as we go into Sunday, expecting a totally different setup, in fact, from Blackpool and Stevie Bruce. And then when we look at our past 5 games, again, remarkably close. But we've won 2, we've lost 1. We won 2, drawn 1, lost 2. So it's even Stevens as we go into Sunday. So before we go into a little bit about Blackpool, how the team set up, etc., tell us a bit about your podcast.
Well, so it's the It's Not Orange podcast. Tom Main basically is the driving force behind it. We started chatting about 18 months ago because we were both writing for one of these awful clickbait sort of what they called. I don't know if they've got clickbait's the best name for them. It's one of these websites where they basically give you a load of stories to sort of rewrite. And we both met on there because we were both a bit disillusioned with it. Started talking about the possibility of because there is another podcast that's been going for a long time, Seasiders podcast, which is great. But we decided we wanted to attack it from a different angle. So we talked about it, and then Tom really picked the baton up and ran with it. So there's a few of us that sort of guest present or co-present with Tom. Tom's got a whole WhatsApp community going now as a result of it. You know, loads of people getting involved with it. We've had some amazing guests. We've had loads of ex-players. We've had Ian Holloway. We had Ian Holloway. We thought for an hour. We had him for nearly 2.5 because he wouldn't shut up. But that was great. It was gold. It was gold. We've had ex-managers. We've had Gary Bowie. We've had Brett Ormerod, the only guy to score in every single league for Blackpool. So it's gone from strength to strength. You know, it does really well, and obviously we reach out to people like yourselves and have a really good relationship with the football community, which is brilliant, really, because I think every person that comes on our podcast is sound, spot on. You know, I mean, not full of themselves. It's just a good. You know, everyone's quite realistic about the team's chances and stuff. So we love doing it. It's like I said, this is like season 2 at the moment for us, and it's going really well. And we all love contributing to it, and we kind of alternate, and it's spot on. It's really, really good.
So you mentioned about the players of old, but obviously close links with the managerial situation at Blackpool at the moment, and obviously for some fans, arguably one of our best ever managers, taking us into the Premier League in Steve Bruce. So, have you actually had the pleasure of being able to interview Steve, or is it just been outside affiliations at the moment?
No, our issue, and we've spoken to a few podcasts who don't have this issue, and plenty that do. Unfortunately, the football club doesn't recognise podcasts. It doesn't like outside people doing content.
Right.
So we've no chance of speaking to any current players unless the ownership situation changes, which is another story that might change. So we don't really get a chance to interview current staff or players, which is a shame. So I only go off the content that everybody else sees, and you know, I think he's done very well since he's been here. Had obviously a horrendous personal crisis to deal with.
Indeed.
You know, 3 or 4 games in, which is devastating for anybody who's got a heart. You know, knows how terrible that is. So no, unfortunately, I don't think the chances of getting him on are very high because they don't. We've asked and asked and asked, but as it stands at the moment, we don't get recognised. We were on Jill. I was on Jill's in the Blood, the Gillingham podcast. Apparently, they seem to get whoever they want. They have a great relationship with their club. I don't know what you guys do, but we've no chance whatsoever at the moment, I'm afraid.
We're very, very similar. I think we've got multiple podcasts that occur, and the club don't want to obviously single out one, and so yeah, we're in a similar position. We were very lucky to have Lucas Djukovic join us a few weeks ago. So obviously he is the first active player at the club to actually come onto the podcast, which has been awesome. And you know, obviously we thank Juki for that and all the different things that he was involved in at the time. But yeah, very similar. Hopefully, as we go into 2025, we'll see a little bit of a change. You know, our change of ownership is really still embedding, I suppose, in terms of what they're doing, but there's definite change afoot. So that's good. So tell us a little bit about Blackpool then. I mean, obviously, we talked about the FA Cup. You know, we've mentioned the 2-1 win for Birmingham in that. But for me, that was two sides that if you see half of that team playing on Sunday, it's going to be surprising. But obviously, with the festive break and 5 games in 13 days for Birmingham, there's no way we cannot shuffle the pack a little bit. So we will see some change. But from a Blackpool perspective, what can we expect going into that game? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of the team?
I mean, we've had a funny season. I mean, you know, we started off with a manager that you know lasted 2 games into this season. You know, Neil Critchley returned, and as often happens, it doesn't work out second time, does it? A lot of the time, I bet the stats bear that out as well. Had a funny season last year, finished 8th. Home form was great. Away form was shocking for most of the season. Got beat 3-1 at home to Stockport, and that was him gone. Then we had a kind of couple of caretakers in Stephen Dobby and Richie Keogh in charge. Yeah. And then up pops totally out of nowhere Steve Bruce, to the point where you're reading it going, Steve Bruce is the Blackpool manager? You're joking. It was a shock because he's been out of the game for 2 years and he wasn't even linked with us. But you know, that said, he won his first 4 games. You know, we won at Huddersfield, we won at Charlton, won a couple of home games as well. Everything was great. Lost at Mansfield, which wasn't so good. And then the tragedy strikes, obviously, with his grandson, which is awful. And we've had a really weird season because we won 4 on the trot, then we didn't win for 7 or 8, and then we won 3 on the trot, and then we've obviously just lost against Wrexham. But our wins have come in clusters. You know, bizarre. We've won more away than we have at home. I think we've won 5 away games. We've only won 2 home games. We haven't won a home game since September. We're very well organised. We need more quality up top, which is obviously, again, a lot of clubs will be looking for that in January. We are well organised. We are fairly hard to break down. Spirited side, like I say, they're playing for each other. There's no doubt about that. But we have a couple of players of real quality in the front positions in terms of Rob Apter, a young lad who obviously is a winger that we had, was on loan at Tranmere last season, come through our ranks. And Kyle Joseph is the top scorer with 7. Yeah. And although that's good, and he works his socks off, runs the channels. He's a really, really good player. Our next top scorer is Ashley Fletcher, who scores about 1 in 9 through his career. We signed him at the start of the season. He's got 3. He's just scored 2 in 2 or 2 in 3. So we are hard to break down, but in the final third, we need some improvement. We do struggle to we scored our goals in clusters. We've had drawn a lot of blanks this season and not really done it. So we need to step that up. So you'll find us probably hard to break down, but maybe not the most exciting side to watch.
Yeah, and I think this is actually, I mean, it's uncanny that you mentioned that, because when Steve Bruce was at Birmingham, we were in a very similar position, to be honest. You know, it's a team that he gets you organised and defensively, and being an ex-captain and defender himself, you know that he knows that if you can read the game, then nobody's going to get past you, and you don't need the pace to be able to dictate a good defensive side. We did struggle, very, very similar to yourself, with striking and going, when it was going forwards with him, we always had a good midfield. We always had a great defence. We always lacked up front. And with Brucey, that was probably one of his downfalls. A lot of players. Yes, he was, he still took us to the promised land as such. And we thank him for that. And he still brought in some players that never would I have ever dreamed. Christophe Dugarry. Who would ever have thought?
I remember him.
Birmingham. So he has this uncanny knack of being able to pull these things off. And I'm sure, when it comes to the window, if he's backed, he'll be able to do some work with yourselves. So as we go into Sunday then, what can we expect from the Blackpool side? So what formation does Steve tend to set you up in the league? And you mentioned a couple of names there, but are there any other key other players and areas that we should look at?
Well, I think in terms of the formation, his predecessor Neil Critchley was obsessed with playing 3-5-2, and the fans hated it. It just, especially away from home, just didn't seem to work. Bruce came in and changed it to a very basic 4-4-2, and he's more or less kept with that. I think sometimes that can become a 3, but more or less it's a fairly standard 4-4-2. It is kind of old school. Ashley Fletcher's got back in the team recently, so there's your target man with Carl Joseph being the sort of the more pacey kind of running the channels kind of guy. In terms of standout performers, I think in midfield he's gone off the boil a bit recently, but we've got Lee Evans, who's a heck of a footballer. He's had a long time injured. He's been at a lot of clubs. I think he was at Wolves, Wigan, Portsmouth, Ipswich. He's come to us, and he's a heck of a player, but he's gone off the boil a little bit in the last month or so. Mm-hmm. We've got Albie Morgan, who came from Charlton at the start of last season. He's got a real habit of kind of pinging him in the corners from about 20 yards. He's a really handy little player, and he recently was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So he had to go back and reevaluate his lifestyle and his training regime and everything. And we weren't sure what was going on with that, but he's come back really strong, and he's playing well at the moment. So, and we've got, as I say, we've got a decent back four at the moment. We've got Harry Tyrer on loan from Everton, who's made his fair share of mistakes, but recently he's found his best form, settled down. He's quite a commanding presence in goal. And goalkeeping situation has been a bit of a problem for us this season. We've alternated between him and Richard O'Donnell. Neither of them have really set the world alight until Tyra got back in about a month ago and has started to play quite well. So, we've got a couple of players that, as Blackpool fans, get you off your seat.
Yep.
But we need more. As he said, and that's where the top end of the pitch. That's what wins games, isn't it? Really, the top end of the pitch is the bit that the business end, and we just haven't got quite enough. But as I say, we're a hard-working side, but. You know yourself, League One is League One. You don't often see any outstanding sides. And we played Wrexham on Boxing Day. And you know what? It was a hell of a goal from Mullin, and we all know about him, and we know about one or two of the players they've got. But they were a fairly basic team, sticking the ball in the box and looking for second balls and flick-ons and all the rest of it. They weren't a great footballing team. I don't think there are many in League One. So you just have to... I think everyone's much of a muchness, but the difference will be the top end of the pitch. Hence why, you've clearly been able to to strengthen that department to the, and it's not Adam Stansfield's fault that you paid all that money for him. It's a hell of a fee, isn't it? But in terms, forget the fee. He's quality up front, and if it was, you'd expect him to get 20 goals. We don't have anybody like that, if we're being honest.
And so that has been one of the differences that we've seen so far. I mean, to start off with, there was a struggle between, we started the season, Alfie May was pinging him in for fun, then Stansfield came in. There was a little bit of an imbalance, but that has now settled. And whilst sometimes you will see Alfie May starting, or other times, as he did on Boxing Day, coming off the bench and just making a total nuisance of himself. But the difference is the fact that Stansfield at the moment, he's just pinging him in for fun. And even when, like at the weekend, he's not going and spanking one from 20 yards, or he's not poaching one. He's taking that penalty, and he's just that pinpoint that it's coming in off the post. That there's that run of form that a striker, never wants to lose. And it's frightening, because as a Birmingham fan, we have really, really missed that. We've not had this attacking trying to strength for many, many years down at the club, and it's a total revamp. And obviously, since the last time, because again, I'll discount the FA Cup, but since the last time we played each other in the league, you will see the raft of a difference. And we go into a St Andrews, which I think last time we played, we were talking around 17, 18,000. We're nearly, not far off another sellout at St Andrews at United Park. So it's just a totally different world. I've got a scary stat, actually, from a Birmingham fan's perspective, because, we were talking there around strikers, and, players will go and score for fun. But when I went back through the records, there's actually a person that, in effect, is our highest goal scorer against Blackpool.
Oh, right, okay.
It's not a striker. It's actually a defender who has not long retired in Curtis Davies. And when I looked at it, I was like, nah, that can't be right. There's got to be somebody else. I went back to the time of the big win, and still nothing at all. So Curtis Davies, we've actually 4 goals. He's our top goal scorer against Blackpool. So it's weird when we talk about these strikers who can score for fun, but majority of our goals came through defensive areas in the past. So
I remember the playoffs of 2012. When we had 2 epic games against you guys. I think he scored late on to make it very, very nervous, and we just managed to squeak through before we got beat by West Ham in the last minute. But I remember that one.
He was on his day, Curtis Davies was one of the standout players and defenders that the club signed. It was sad to see him go when he went, but it was his time to move on. So, and he did go on to do decent things before retiring. So, and now I think he's busy working hard for Sky a lot. So,
very, very hard for Sky. He's never off it.
No, that's it. Which leads me on to a nice point around ex-players, because I always like to challenge people when they join me on the away end. And the challenge is to come up with 5 players that have represented both clubs. Now, I could be nice and let you have Keshi Anderson.
Oh, God, he was one of my 5 already.
But I'm sorry, it's too close to home at the moment
Fair dues.
to mention that one. So, have you got 5 others that you can think of represented both clubs over the years? Because there's actually quite a decent list.
So, I've got some obscure ones, but so the other obvious one for Blackpool fans is DJ Campbell.
Indeed.
Who I believe, look, he went to Leicester and couldn't hit a cow's what's it with a banjo, but when he came to us, he couldn't. Leicester let him go, and you could argue he kind of cost him promotion that season, because while they struggled in the playoffs, we got through the playoffs and he couldn't stop scoring. So the DJ Campbell. There's also a blast from the past who's obviously a really, he's still a very prominent manager, is Gary Rowett.
Indeed.
Because we had him on loan from Everton, and I think he went to your place. And I can't have Keshi, so that's no good. Here's a random one for you, which I don't know if he ever played many games for you, but does the name Andrew Barrowman ring a bell?
Does indeed, yes.
So I'll tell you a quick story about Andrew Barrowman. So I used to work I work in education now, but I used to work in journalism, and I was working for one of the local papers over this way. And I interviewed Colin Hendry because Colin Hendry signed Andrew Barrowman on loan.
Yep.
And I asked him about Andrew Barrowman, and he said to me, if Andrew Barrowman was half the player he thought he was, he'd be a hell of a player. He said, because he came in, he was on something like, now this is 2004, but he came into, or 2005, he came from your place and he was on something like 10 grand a week and was driving like a top of the range Beamer. I don't think he'd barely played for you guys.
Right.
Came on loan to us. Colin Hendry didn't play him very often, and Steve Bruce recalled him, and he hardly kicked the ball for us. But when he did play, he was terrible. So I remember him, and that's like it's like good to have a left field one, isn't it? And do you know what? Right now, there's going to be tons of obvious ones, and now I'm starting to struggle. I'm really genuinely starting to struggle here because we've had that many players come through the door that the chances are tons of them would play for you lot. But I'm struggling. I'm genuinely struggling with. Obviously, if you let me have Keshi, that would have been 4. But I'm stuck on 3. Genuinely stuck on 3.
I'll let you have Keshi then.
All right, then.
It is Christmas after all, so I've got to be nice in one way off the shape. So I'll let you have Keshi. Let me give you some hints, maybe on.
Yeah, go
on. So you've had a right winger who signed a loan transfer from Birmingham to yourselves in 2017, 2018. You had a goalkeeper in 15-16. He was actually a free transfer at that time from Birmingham to yourselves. Didn't represent Birmingham perhaps as much as what he could have done, but he was a gentle giant, definitely. Another one right back, 13-14. He actually signed from you to us on a free
Neil
transfer.
Eardley.
Neil Eardley. Good shout.
Do you know, he popped into my head before, and I thought, I had this idea that he played for you guys. So yeah, Neil Eardley then.
Let's see. And I mean, to run through those other ones that I mentioned there, I mean, firstly, the right winger was Viv Solomon Otterbull.
Oh God, I remember him. Yes, he was good. Yeah. He was pretty good. Yeah, yeah.
Goalkeeper was Colin Doyle.
Yes.
You mentioned there Neil Eardley. We've had Barry Ferguson. I mean, what?
Yes, of course.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Midfielder that nothing was getting past him, but a genuinely nice guy. And then
Kevin Phillips.
Kevin Phillips. I was about to say you mentioned strikers, but Kev Phillips, yeah. Same season. Came to yourselves on a loan transfer. Another centre forward, 2005, 2006. Gain didn't really get too much of an opportunity at Birmingham. Came to you on loan, and that was Navji Kuchi.
Oh God, yeah, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, you've mentioned Andrew Barrowman.
Yeah.
Another centre forward, James Quinn, 93, 94 season.
Quinny, absolutely brilliant. What a player he was, by the way. I think we paid something like, I think we gave you 50 grand for him or something ridiculous like that, but he did the business for us, yeah.
Indeed.
God.
And then we, for me, one of the probably best centre halves that you will see in the game. There was also a genuinely nice guy. Steve Bruce will have played with him. And, I think actually he signed him for Birmingham. And that's Gary Ablett. What a gentle giant, and what a
Steve McMahon signed him in the season that we eventually got promoted in 2000, 2001. Yeah, and, I remember. Yeah.
Then when we go back over the years, 2 names stand out a mile. First one, 1976-77 season. Centre forward in Bob Hatton. I mean, what guy from Birmingham. And he signed for yourselves at the time for 68,000. So the funny thing is, he signed for more than you paid for James Quinn.
Blimey.
Going back over the years.
Yeah.
And then finally, the earliest one that I could find as a signing between the two clubs was again another centre forward. and that was Fred Pickering.
Oh God, yeah. Well, he's legendary, Fred Pickering, for scoring a hat-trick against Preston away at Deepdale, which promoted us and got them relegated on the same night. So, yeah, before my time, but legendary. Some great names there.
There are, and I mean, across the years, when I looked at that list, I was like, there are some absolute blinders there, and players that, I know I've seen myself and thought, wow. And I know some of them will have been at the back end of their careers when they signed for both clubs, but it doesn't matter, because they all wore their heart on their sleeve and took things forward. And finally, we talk about people to have represented both clubs, but how can we go on without mentioning, as you've already done so a little bit there, but Steve Bruce, the legend that took Birmingham out of the Championship into the Premier League, that took us to our highest finish in the Premier League, that got us relegated from the Premier League, but took us back to the Premier League as well. And I think, if he'd have had some further backing and players that he wanted, he'd have kept us there and took us on a continual phenomenal run. And I hope, this time of year, we always do think of families. And, do want to say, as we did at the time, huge condolences to Steve and all the family for what happened. It's a horrible, horrible thing to happen, no matter who you are, what he went through, and the way he's come back from it just shows how much of a gentleman he is, and it's a credit to him. So we go into Sunday then. Already mentioned, it's going to be another raucous atmosphere at St Andrews at Knighthead Park. 3 o'clock kickoff on a Sunday. God, that sounds weird to say.
It is weird. Yeah.
But with the festive breaks and the way that they are, we knew it was going to come this particular way. So, what does your head say, and what does your heart say the result will be?
My head says a kind of a spirited display from us, but probably with not enough quality to get a result. My heart says that we can dig in and it wouldn't be too far. I wouldn't be that surprised if we managed to get a 1-1, but it also wouldn't surprise me if we were beaten by finishing power on the day, because, as I say, we went to Reading a few weeks ago, and I mean, I don't think Reading are as good as you. I'm sure they're not. They're not of the investment, but also they're not quite as good as probably the league position suggested at the time. But we went there and won 3-0, and it could have been 5 or 6.
Yeah,
and we are better away from home. I'd probably be more worried if this was at home. So in some ways, I could see us nicking something because I think we've got that ability to dig in. But like we almost showed at Wrexham. I mean, as a little aside, if anyone saw the penalty that we got given against us at Wrexham, it's one of the worst penalty decisions you'll ever see in your life. You're getting penalties now for if the ball hits you back as a defender, the referee giving penalty. So you don't need to do much to earn one these days. And obviously, he basically pooed his pants because the crowd shouted in front of him, and he got a bit scared and gave him a penalty. But if we assume we've got a half decent ref and it's a fair decent game, then it wouldn't surprise me if we dug in for a 1-1 or even a 2-2. But my head probably says it'll be a narrow defeat. I don't think there'll be a lot in it.
No, and I'm not going to say we're going to go out, score 5, 6, 7 goals. It's not like
please don't. Please don't do that.
Don't get me wrong. I wasn't there for that big win, so I'd love to see it. But I don't. It's a Stevie Bruce side that we know are renowned for being defensively strong. So that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a very hard team to break down, and I think it will take time. I don't think we're going to, see these raft of goals as we've seen in some games that are going to turn up really early, and then it's going to be a quiet second half. I actually think it could be the opposite. It's going to be tight as always, but I think we'll come away and do I think we'll keep a clean sheet? I hope so. I really do hope we can continue that run of clean sheets. If we do, I think it'll come away as a 2-0. If we're going to concede, it'll be late on, and then you'll make it very uncomfortable for the last 10 minutes of the game, should we say. There's my prediction. So, my head says 2-0. My heart says 2-1. but it's going to be a close game, and I expect it, like I say, under Steve Bruce. What I also expect is that there would be a pocket of fans that absolutely love Mr. Bruce still, and we'll give him the round of applause that the most of the fans would say he deserves.
Yeah.
It's also going to be that pocket that remember he went across to the other side of the city, and it's that team in claret and blue. So because of that, there are going to be people that also want to give him that little bit of abuse. But I hope it's more applause than it is abuse on the day. It's going to be a great game. Thank you very much indeed again for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome.
On the away end. And I will sign off by saying, enjoy the game. I wish you all the very best for 2025. And I can say that because we'll still be in 2024 when we play you. So all the best for 2025, apart from, of course, when we come to Blackpool and play you in the league. And I hope the season goes well for you for the rest of it. And thank you very much again for joining me on the away end in association with AMG Logistics. Keep right on.
Cheers.